Thanks very much for watching this video. This is actually the second part where I've been looking at the Adobe Developers Conference that recently happened around commerce and looking at key points in the keynote speech in order to determine what I think that Adobe has in store for both open source and commerce in the future. I'll be carrying on in the same way. It's the first part, so I'll be watching each clip and then giving my thoughts, and I'll finally wrap up with my conclusion on where I think long-term Adobe is going to be going with both open source and commerce. So let's get started watching some of these clips.
That's why we're excited to be collaborating across Adobe Experience Cloud on a unified developer experience and alternate extensibility framework that leverages Adobe I/O and Adobe App Builder.
Alternate extensibility framework. To me, that suggests that the current way that Adobe Commerce is developed is going to change completely. You're going to be pushed onto moving Adobe's tools. So the only customization is going to be through Adobe I/O, and you're going to have to use their toolkit. As long as the code base which exists currently remains, you'll still have the normal customization there, but as more and more services move across to a SaaS version, I think that huge level of flexibility we see in the current code base is going to be vastly reduced, because you'll be restricted to a much lesser level of customization that's possible to do through SaaS or API basically. So yeah, that's kind of interesting that they're revealing really there that the way that you develop the framework is going to change entirely, and that you're going to have to use their developer toolkit essentially.
Leveraging Adobe App Builder, commerce developers will be able to build custom micro front-ends that can be seamlessly integrated into the storefront or back office user experiences. Extend Commerce GraphQL and REST APIs via no-code or low-code integrations.
So that's an interesting one. So that's saying you can use microservices as part of Adobe I/O to extend / change core functionality. To what extent that will be possible, I can tell you for sure it won't be to the extent that it's currently possible with the current code base, because you've got full access to everything basically. Now we'll be restricted to just what Adobe give us access to via the API. And it's also interesting at the end that he says low code or no code. So that suggests to me that we're going to be restricted to using basically a GUI or a panel of some sort which Adobe have built out, which allows you customization but only within their boundaries that they define. So I think their push is really towards enabling them to spend as little time and resources on maintaining the services that they offer, and restricting really your level of customization to ensure that their core functionality works as intended. There's pluses and minuses to that, isn't it? I guess the pluses is that you're probably going to get less conflicts and less issues with upgrades and things like that, but the massive downside is the huge loss of flexibility and ability to customize Magento, which we currently have, and that's one of the big selling points, isn't it? If you go with Magento over another option, then you get that versatility unlike any other framework really.
Commerce developers will also benefit from a centralized developer experience that is common across commerce and other Adobe applications via the Adobe Developer Console.
Yes, again, it is confirming developers will have to work through the Adobe Developer Console. They'll be restricted to whatever Adobe allow the developer to do. So we don't know how extensive that console is or what exactly it will allow you to customize compared to what you currently can with the code base. It'll be interesting to see that, but that signifies quite a change in the way development is going to happen in the future for Adobe Commerce.
First, as I mentioned previously, you'll see no more significant feature development delivered via core application releases.
And again, so what is that, third, fourth time? So they really want to push home the fact here, don't they, that there's no new features coming to the code base as it currently stands. Everything is moving to SaaS services, which currently are going to augment or add on basically to the current code base. We'll see what the future brings with that. I've got some thoughts on that which I'll bring in the conclusion. But yeah, they want to push that fact home, don't they?
We'll also be making greater use of the quality patch tool to deliver non-essential core changes, including community contributions outside of the required version upgrades.
So to me, they're saying their quality patch tool is how they're going to deliver community changes and non-essential changes, so it doesn't sound like there's going to be anything around security or bug fixes or anything like that through the quality patch tool, but they do say that they're going to deliver community driven changes. So to me, that sounds like that's the way the quality patch tool is the way they're going to deliver STS releases. Whether that will be a new version, I kind of think just because it's a patch tool, it maybe community releases are not going to be even have their own release number. I suspect that probably the release numbers may be restricted to LTS releases coming from Adobe, and then anything that the community develops will just come in as an individual patch per sort of feature or change, if you like, but the actual version number of Magento probably won't change. It's just speculation. I don't know if that will actually happen, but to me that's kind of what it sounds like.
And as a result of decoupling all other development from the core, we'll be able to start streamlining our core release strategy. This has given us the ability to make some important adjustments to upcoming end of support timelines that you'll want to learn more about.
So on this page, there's a QR code. So they talk about changes in support schedule and release support schedule. And if you go through the QR code, it's not an extensive page at all. It's a fairly short page, but it talks about the fact that support to enable you to upgrade to 2.4.4 with a bit more time. So support for previous versions is going to, I believe, September, I think it is, of this year. So that's been extended, but then there's also a bit below that which says that if you're using any version under 2.4.4, then you're going to be subject to an additional fee for support. So if you've got 2.3.7 or 2.4.0 to 2.4.3, then you're going to be subject to paid support. So that's kind of interesting. They didn't say that blatantly in the keynote. I can understand why, because I don't want to tell people they're going to have to pay more. But yeah, that's on that page. So if you just scan that QR code, you can go and have a look for yourself.
Any idea of how long the LTS release will be supported? I don't know, Eric, if you have anything to comment on there. I don't know that we've talked about specifics like that.
Right, okay, so LTS, no idea how long support is going to be for that. I can't believe that they have got to the point of confirming this new LTS, STS release schedule and haven't even talked about the timings of that. It doesn't really make sense to me. I think they probably don't want to tell us. I can only speculate in that means it's probably going to be a fairly long period of time between LTS releases. It could be twice a year, it could be once a year. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, but my sort of gut feeling would be that we're likely looking at a longer period of time than a shorter period of time, but we'll see how that pans out.
We do not have a plan to EOL or stop supporting Luma. We are throwing our investment and a lot of that work in the UI front into PWA. That's where we'll see the innovation. But we're not getting rid of Luma right now.
Okay, so Luma, it's a well-used theme, isn't it? Been part of Magento since the beginning, really. So that's just Magento really is not going to see any changes on Luma. Adobe are not going to. To me, that's suggests to me that for Adobe, Luma's very much sort of a side thing. It's not really on their radar. So I think what they're saying here is they will continue to support that in terms of security fixes along with the rest of the code base, but really I'd be very, very surprised if that makes its way over to the Experience Cloud offering of Commerce. I think probably they'll just keep it until more services start moving across to Experience Cloud, and eventually they'll probably just drop that.
So Robert Rand asked about the extension developers losing access to Adobe Commerce dev licenses. Robert, that is something that we are continuing to work here. It's about fitting kind of our existing, our legacy, if you will, partner processes into Adobe's partner approach.
So that's kind of interesting that they refer to the current setup for dev licenses for extension creation as already legacy. So they're already considering that method outdated. So that's definitely going to be replaced, no doubt about that. So we don't know how, but my kind of thought is that probably they'll replace that with the new development experience, if you like, of developing on Adobe's developer toolkit. So I think probably they're going to move everyone across onto that. So they may keep the current dev licensing for extension development going for a while longer, but I think that's probably their longer term plan, or even medium term plan, is to move everyone across onto the their developer toolkit essentially. So I would expect that to happen, probably relatively soon, within months maybe. We'll see, but I think probably that's just an indication of, and a confirmation really, of the way that development is going to be changing, or the way that you access development tools is going to be changing.
Peter asked about, so LTS doesn't mean a stable core and only security fixes. I may be simplifying it a little bit. I mean, to me, that's what we're talking about here. Is Adobe's responsibility with the open source core is about maintaining stability and security, and I'll throw in maintaining PCI compliance. And the idea there with the community-owned STS versions is that can be where community authored, community developed new innovations and things can live.
Yep. Okay. So someone asked a question. Basically, is LTS, or sort of said, I think it sounds like they said in the comments, that LTS is not only going to be security fixes, but then Adobe come back and say, well, actually, yeah, it is only going to be security fixes. So that's kind of confirming that LTS releases, or the releases that Adobe are responsible for, are just going to be security fixes, and anything sort of absolutely critical. So they're kind of washing their hands really of any more maintenance than is absolutely essential of the current code base, and all their attention is going onto the SaaS offerings on Experience Cloud. And then they just also confirmed that the STS releases are going to be fully responsible the community is going to be fully responsible for those releases. So they're not going to really have any hand in the STS releases, is what it sounds like to me.
That's a big part of the idea of what LTS is about for us, is stability, lighter updates, security compliance only.
Yeah, okay. So again, just reiterating, they really want to push the point home that moving forward, there's going to be nothing but security fixes for the current code base as we know it, and they say only at the end, just to make sure you've really heard. So yeah, that's pretty much what we've already learned, but just making sure that they nip anything in the bud which people might be thinking, oh, maybe they're going to do more to the current code base, but no.
Yeah, Robert asked about any other anticipated Adobe Commerce features coming to Magento Open Source. Nothing to announce at this time.
Okay, so last thing really is just them saying they're not moving any commerce features across to open source at all. So even though they're going through the replacing lots of the features or lots of the functionality with SaaS versions, there's no plans in Adobe's mind to replace or to move, some of those commerce only features over to open source edition. So we can pretty much expect Adobe to keep the current code base as it stands at the moment, virtually exactly as it stands. There'll be no more feature development on either Commerce Edition or on Open Source Edition, and if you want to be seeing any additional functionality, you've got to go and move across to their SaaS services. So that's quite an interesting talk to me. I think that the things that they brought up are quite insightful as to what they're thinking exactly, and it'll be interesting to see how things progress. But yeah, time will tell, I suppose, on that front. So it was pretty interesting to watch those clips, wasn't it? And what can we conclude from what was actually said in the keynote? So for open source, it's great news to hear that this is now going to live with Magento Association or the community. That's a good move. That gives a huge amount of freedom for future direction of development for open source. And it also creates a separation of concerns between open source and commerce. So open source now has freedom to develop new features without any ties or dependencies to Adobe, and this means it's positioned really well to cater for the huge numbers of SMBs and even enterprises that want that full level of customization of the code base, which Magento currently in its form offers, and which you largely lose really when you move into the realm of SaaS. For commerce, Adobe's initial take really is to make this kind of hybrid of plugging in SaaS services into the current code base, but there's really a strong shift towards a gradual retiring of features offered by the current code base, instead replacing them with pure SaaS offerings. So Adobe have already released product recommendations and search as SaaS services, and catalog, inventory and pricing are next on the list. So there's some pretty fundamental core features, isn't there, already moving to SaaS offerings. So eventually I think we'll see SaaS-based replacements for all core functionality, followed by Adobe then stripping out that legacy, as they'll probably refer to it, core functionality from the current code base and moving wholesale to SaaS with Experience Cloud Edition of Commerce. So at this point I can actually see Adobe announcing they'll be retiring Commerce completely in its current form, while also cutting ties with Open Source Edition fully. I just can't realistically see Adobe indefinitely supporting both the features currently offered by the code base and the replacement SaaS services. It just doesn't make business sense to do that. So whether this is actually what happens long term or not, only time will tell, but from the keynote it certainly seems to me to be the direction that Adobe are moving in. So I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for any further news from Adobe on this front, but for now, thanks for watching this keynote breakdown, and if you're on the lookout for a developer for your e-commerce store, not just Magento, you can visit our marketplace to find quality UK based developers at developerconnection.co.uk.